Hi everyone. Okay, in my last video I talked about the action thriller made in 1980 set in New York that is Night of the Juggler. Terrific thriller. Coincidentally, this week we also have released by Arrow the 1981 movie that's set in New York, directed by Abel Ferrara, and that's Ms. 45. So in this video I want to talk about that movie, but I also want to stay in New York and talk about other movies that came out based in New York between roughly the period of 1978 to 1982. So here we go. I just think this is an interesting time period when you look at movies that are set in New York, particularly when you look at the movies that are of a more dramatic nature and then compare those with some of the sort of action thrillers or serial killer movies, crime movies, and then also the music movies that were coming out of New York at that time. So I'll just talk about some of those. Okay, but let's just talk about Ms. 45 for a moment, because that film is being released by Arrow this week. And yeah, interesting one this. Made in 1981, directed by Abel Ferrara, and based in Manhattan. Now, this film follows on from Abel Ferrara's previous notorious banned film Driller Killer that was also set in New York and which focused on a guy, an artist who was struggling to live financially there and resorted to killing people on Poverty Row with a drill. So yeah, banned film, that one. I was aware of that film growing up. I was not aware of Ms. 45, a film that also was banned for many years. But yeah, I've now been able to see it on Canopy in its new print. It really does look good. And yeah, I do think that this may be the best Abel Ferrara movie that I have seen. Now, the story focuses on a mute woman who works for a clothing design company, and in the early part of the film she is raped, not just once but twice in quick succession. So yeah, very dramatic. She does fend off her second attacker and manages to grab his 45 caliber pistol. But yeah, suffering from the sort of stress from that, post-traumatic stress, she then goes on a killing spree, and this is actually in central Manhattan, so really quite dramatic how the scenes play out, because you're right in the heart of the city here, and she takes on all comers here. So whether it be her kind of abusive boss, whether it be pimps who beat up their prostitutes, whether it's wealthy men who try to pick up women in cars, or the leering, lascivious men who lurk about on Times Square. So yeah, she goes for them all. So yes, it is a violent film, although perhaps not as extreme as many films are nowadays, but yeah, visually very impressive. And the woman that plays the mute lead in this film is Zoe Lund, and she gives a really expressive, good performance in this. And interestingly, she was only 19 at the time, made this with Abel Ferrara, but she also went on to work more with Abel Ferrara and actually co-wrote the 1992 film Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel. And talking of banned films, in 1979 we also had Lucio Fulci's Zombie, or Zombie Flesh Eaters, and this one famously culminates in zombies actually arriving in New York and walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. And then 1982, Lucio Fulci was to do it again with another movie based in Manhattan, and that was the very shocking The New York Ripper. So I think this film is probably the more disturbing of all of the films that I've mentioned so far. It does have some very gruesome gore in this and excessive nudity as well. But yeah, this one features lots of scenes set around Brooklyn Bridge, the Staten Island Ferry, and in central Manhattan as well. And then 1980, we also get Brian De Palma's slasher thriller Dressed to Kill, starring Michael Caine and Angie Dickinson. And even Frank Sinatra got in on the act a little bit with The First Deadly Sin, co-starring Faye Dunaway, also in 1980. But elsewhere in Manhattan around this time period, things were a little bit more intellectual in Manhattan, or a bit dramatic. So for example, we had Norman Mailer and Germaine Greer duking it out in Town Bloody Hall. We had Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory having intellectual discussion over dinner in My Dinner with Andre. We had Woody Allen and Diane Keaton and a young Mariel Hemingway in Manhattan. We had Claudia Wilde's Girlfriends, in which One woman has to learn to live by herself on the Upper West Side after her other friends and roommates go their own ways. And then also we have Jim Jarmusch's first movie. No, not this one, but it is on this Criterion set, and it is Permanent Vacation, about a guy who's obsessed with Charlie Parker and who wanders around aimlessly around Manhattan trying to spark connection with various people, and then ultimately decides to leave New York. And then also around this time period we get various films where we have fairly decent, honest folk who live around the city who are having to stand up against gangs that are infiltrating their areas. So for example, there's Vigilante starring Robert Forster. There's a movie from 1978 which I doubt any of you have watched. It's one I watched when I was young. It really stayed with me, and that's a film called Siege, which stars Dorian Harewood, and then he plays this gang member who is trying to scare old people out of their tenement blocks, and the old couple that decide to fight back against him are played by Martin Balsam and Sylvia Sidney. And then there's also the movie Defiance, which is directed by John Flynn, who also directed Rolling Thunder and The Outfit. And this one stars Jan Michael Vincent as a guy who works at sea, and he's having to just stay temporarily in New York until he gets his next sea assignment, and he stays with the community, and again they are beset upon by a vicious gang, but quite an odd gang in this movie. They're called the Souls, and really their viciousness includes just walking in on people on bingo night and robbing them, beating up an old guy, and even stomping all over the flowers on a roof garden. It's quite a bizarre film, this one. And then when it comes to policing, well, there's not just Al Pacino going through the gay bars in Cruising, but there's also up in the Bronx, the police there, under-resourced and overwhelmed in the film Fort Apache, The Bronx, starring Paul Newman. Pretty good one, this, featuring a very memorable performance from Pam Grier as a prostitute who has a rather inventive use of a razor blade. Or down in Manhattan, there's police corruption problems in Prince of the City, directed by Sidney Lumet and starring Treat Williams. And there's even some terrorism in New York, and you'll find that in Nighthawks, 1981 movie that stars Sylvester Stallone and Billy D. Williams as buddy cops who are having to fight against a terrorist played by Rutger Hauer, who has come to New York from England, determined to wreak havoc. He centres around Manhattan, goes to Wall Street, goes to sort of expensive nightclubs, and also Roosevelt Island, and goes on the cable car there. So yeah, another movie centred in Manhattan. And if that wasn't enough, then there were also murders taking place that were being caused by wolves, or really spirit animals, in the movie Wolfen, which starred Albert Finney and Gregory Hines. But then also in New York around this time period, things were pretty interesting in film musically as well. So for example, 1979 we get the Oscar-winning All That Jazz, starring Roy Scheider as Bob Fosse, the legendary choreographer and dancer who really pushed himself to excess. So yeah, great movie this, focusing on Broadway and indeed opening with that brilliant on-Broadway dance number. And then the very next year, in 1980, we get another Oscar-winning movie, and that is Fame, directed by Alan Parker. And this one really focuses on kids who are hoping to be famous on Broadway. This is based on an actual school that's on West 46th, a performing arts school, where students aim to learn drama, music and dance, and yeah, this film really juggles the line, I suppose, between showing that drive for success but also the possible downfalls that may happen, and possibly the ending up on the rather seedy side of 42nd Street if you're not careful. Far more exhilarating was the 1980 film Times Square, directed by Alan Moyle, about two girls who want to form a punk band, and they do that around Times Square. But yeah, this film is excellent for its soundtrack, which includes the likes of Roxy Music, Talking Heads, XTC, The Ramones, The Pretenders, The Cure, Gary Newman, you name it, they're all on there. Excellent soundtrack. And then also, perhaps most significantly of all music-wise, in 1982 we get the movie Wild Style, which was the first film that really embraced hip-hop, and it also really embraced the sort of graffiti art culture that was going on in New York as well. But yeah, excellent movie this, very amateurish and raw in terms of its sort of storytelling, but just fantastic for the hip-hop side of things. This features Fab Five Freddy, who also worked with Blondie, Grandmaster Flash, but yeah, great movie this one. And then also on the punk side of things as well, we do get in 1982 Susan Seidelman's Smithereens. But ultimately, I have to end this video by talking about a movie that is not really like any of those, and it is Walter Hill's 1979 classic, The Warriors. I really love this movie, and this is about various gangs who meet up in the Bronx, and there's an altercation that happens that ends up with the Warrior gang being accused of a crime, and they then have to make their way back to Coney Island with all these other gangs in pursuit of them. Absolutely terrific film this, and what I really love about this movie is just how it uses New York for its setting. Most of this is all filmed at night, and it really is quite amazing how they managed to film in the Bronx, Manhattan, Coney Island as well, and really do it in a kind of deserted way. So they managed to film without the interference of any normal people who are living in New York, and they really created this kind of other world. All the gangs that are in this movie, they don't represent real gangs, they don't look like real gangs. This really is quite a fantastical kind of movie, and it plays really well. The violence in it, yes, there is violence, but again, it's kind of stylized, and yeah, great music in this as well. Absolute classic from 1979, and just a brilliant run through the Bronx, Manhattan to Coney Island, one of my favourite places actually that I visited, and yes, I got the t-shirt when I was there. Okay, so that is a run through of movies that have been made in New York around the period of 1978 to 1982, quite significant ones I think, but let me know in the comments of any significant ones that you think I've omitted, and also just let me know your comments on the movies that I have mentioned. Hope you enjoyed this video, thanks very much for watching, all the best to you, see you again soon I hope, bye bye.